Do you want to know how elite runners train and how they peak for their best race? Well, this is a deep dive video. We're going to break it all down for you.
Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
Good morning. We're out here in Asheville, North Carolina, and I want to share with you an opportunity that you have right now to learn about training in a way that you probably haven't thought about it before. Now, what I'm going to share with you here is an opportunity to learn how the elites train. Now, I don't want you to think that you have to do the same kinds of workouts that elite runners do, because they're at a very high level and maybe those workouts are just too fast, too long, too big, and the truth is that you don't need to do those workouts. But what we want to do is we want to take the structure that elite runners use and we want to cut it and then paste it into your life so that you can use the same principles that they use. Because the truth is that elite runners, they do a really great job at one thing. They know what's most important to them. They know when their biggest race is, they know when the peak in their season needs to be, and so they cultivate a performance so that on race day, they're able to achieve much higher than they could even earlier that season. It's called peaking, and that's what I'm gonna share with you here today. So I want you to lock in and take some notes and just pay attention, because this is gonna be some of the best time you've ever spent learning about how to train.
Welcome inside. Come and have a seat with me. And we're going to talk about the triphasic model of training. I'm going to show you how you can make a shift in the way that you structure your training so that you can peak your performance. Now, before we dive into the specifics of the triphasic model, let's look at how most people train, not just in running, but in weightlifting or in any other sport, really. And the idea is that they want to do progressive overload. Now, progressive overload basically just means I'm doing a certain amount of training now, and so I'm going to do more training and get better. And it kind of looks like this. You're going to run more. You might think that you want to just run longer long runs, right? If you're a marathoner. Or when you go to the track, that you're going to do faster intervals, or you're just going to basically do more until boom, something happens. That's the problem with progressive overload, is that eventually, if you just stack on more, eventually you're going to get either injured, you're going to plateau, or you're going to burn out. It reminds me of Rocky, really. So in the movie Rocky, he's not that fit, and then he makes a decision that he's going to go and train really hard, right? So he gets up early and he goes and he pushes really hard and he hits the bags and he drinks the raw eggs, which is kind of gross. Yeah, it's crazy, right? The idea is just that if he goes faster and if he goes harder and if he tries harder, he's going to get better. But if you do that, you're going to get injured, you're going to plateau, or you're going to burn out. You can't just do that forever. It's not how training really works. So instead, what we want to do is with the triphasic model, instead of just pushing and pushing and pushing until something happens, we want to cultivate a peak so it looks more like this. There's a base, there's a foundation that you build. And then on top of that, you stack a support training. If you run the marathon, let's look at the way most runners think that they should train. Most runners believe that they should train their heart and their lungs, because the heart and the lungs are the things that power you through the marathon. It's kind of like this belief. Or we might want to do things like lactate threshold runs. These are beliefs that runners have, and they're not true. I'm going to prove it to you very simply right here. Now, in the marathon, you're only running at about 78% or so of your VO2 max, and you're running at about 85 to 95% of your lactate threshold. So they're not maxed out. Now, if you race really hard, something gets maxed out, right? You're pushing really hard, your body's giving out, you're cramping up, whatever it is, something is going full tilt, but it's not your heart and lungs, and it's not your lactate threshold. Think about that for a second. So what is getting maxed out? In short, it's the muscular system. But this gets even crazier. If you're an ultra runner, and some of you are, I am myself, I love running the super long distances. As you run longer, the VO2max and lactate threshold contribute even less. And in a 100 miler, you might only be at half of what your aerobic capacity is. But something sure gets maxed out, and you're only at half of what your heart and lungs can do, which means you have reserves there to do even more. It's not what's limiting you. Even if your lactate threshold, for example, were limiting your performance, let's look at what the Journal of Exercise Physiology says. Now, you can pause this or rewind and go back and read it, but I'm just going to highlight for you here at the bottom. They show that even if lactate threshold is something that you want to train, you don't need to train it by running at lactate threshold pace. You can run nice and easy, and you're still going to get the same benefits towards your lactate threshold. Now, I'm going to show you what does limit your performance. I want you to think of this in different tiers. In the general model of training, instead of just doing more and more and hoping that you get better, if you've been in the game for a while, you might train differently. You might train smarter and do some kind of general training in your running, and then stack on in the weeks or the months before your race, you might stack on some harder training. Because you understand that if you train more specifically for your marathon, for example, you'll get better. Okay, this is true. And this is where you would do things like lactate threshold, VO2max runs, things like that. Now, these will help, but you're missing the big picture if this is how you train. And this is how a lot of runners train. Now, this does make sense, but only within training your metabolic systems. So you see that this triangle on the left is where most runners focus, and it does make sense, but there are 3 other levels that they're neglecting. And when you realize this, you can stack your training in a way that gives you a peak in performance. Now, so let's build from the bottom up, shall we? Now at the bottom, the thing that ultimately kind of determines how you're going to be able to run is your body composition. Now let's just put a visual to this. Here's a couple of Olympians here. We've got, on the left, we've got Dominique Moceanu, a very short, petite gymnast from the 90s. She was excellent. She's an Olympian. And then we've got Shaq on the right. Who do you think is going to be better at throwing the shot put? Even if the gymnast here had years of top level coaching, do you think she's ever going to beat Shaq? Because he's just able to throw a ball further because of the way his body is built. It's the same with your running. Then you want to train the things that most runners are doing. You want to train your heart and lungs, your metabolic systems, because they're going to be what fuel you to be able to train and race and just go for a long time. Sure, but we don't want to stop there. So the rest of this training here is going to be on what limits your performance on top of that. And that is your neuromuscular system. So make no mistake about it, when you go out to run any distance, your muscles have to move you down the road or the trail or the track. It's a neuromuscular event. Now, I'll prove this to you just logically, and then I'll show you in a chart here kind of how this works out, all right? Do you remember Lance Armstrong? Lance Armstrong, the biker. Now, when he retired, he ran the New York City Marathon. Now, get this, on paper, Lance was as good, if not better, than the world record holder in the marathon. He had a VO2 max that was the same, and he had a lactate threshold that was even better than Paul Turgot, the world record holder at the time. And Turgot ran about a 2:04. Quick ad break. No, just kidding. No ads here. But instead, I'm going to take a second here to tell you to grab a copy of the Run Elite book if you don't have it already. It's going to take everything we're learning here on this video, but break it into like minute details so you can apply it for you. And another bonus for you is you can watch my free training for you. It's about an hour long where I'm going to walk you through every step of how to think about your training and how to set it up. It's completely for free. The link is in the description below. Check those out. Back to the video. So on paper, Lance Armstrong should have been able to run a world record, but he ran almost an hour slower. All right. He's really fit. His heart and lungs were a powerhouse. His lactate threshold was off the hook, but he was an hour slower because his neuromuscular system wasn't conditioned. That's what we need to do. We need to focus on the neuromuscular system. Now, within the neuromuscular system, there are 3 different ways that you want to train in. This is the triphasic model. So let's jump into that right now. Do my best to animate this here for you. So if we look at our continuum, you have fast twitch fibers on your left and slow twitch on the right. I've chosen the marathon pace right here in the middle, but this can be any race distance. This is just for convenience, okay? So let's say you're going to run a marathon and your goal pace is 7 minutes per mile. Okay, so to run 5 miles at marathon pace looks like that. To run a half marathon looks like that. And to run the whole thing is at the top of this chart. So that's what we're dealing with here. Now, in order to get these muscle fibers strong enough to run the whole distance like that, you would think that you would want to be able, let's say you can run 3 to 5 miles at marathon pace right now, that the logical thing to do would be to train until you can run 10 and then maybe 16 miles at marathon pace, all the way up to where you can run the whole distance. Now, in theory, that makes sense, but it's a flawed concept because you can only train a specific aspect of your fitness for about 6 weeks before it plateaus, and then you need to do something different to have a new gain in fitness. Now, the problem is that your race pace is very specific, and so you can only train it for about 6 weeks specifically. Now, during those 6 weeks, how much gain in fitness are you going to have? Maybe you'll go from here to maybe here, which would be pretty good, but it's not going to get you to your PR race distance, right? Now, what if you were already incredibly fit leading into it? So those 6 weeks, instead of spent down here, could be spent up here, and you have a dramatic increase in your fitness because your training is very specific and very difficult. Well, that sounds nice, Andrew, right? But it's really hard to go out and do a 22 or 23 mile run at marathon pace. If I could do that, geez, I wouldn't need to train at all. Yes, that's true. Very difficult. So what can you do to support it? Let's say you had a 22 or 23 mile training run at marathon pace. Well, that's kind of difficult, but imagine that leading up to that, you could also complete a 15 mile run 30 seconds faster at a 30 seconds faster pace. And you could also do a 25 or even 30 mile run at a minute and a half slower than marathon pace. So you have a lot of speed endurance and you have a lot of long, easy endurance. Now, if you could complete those kinds of training, and I would call that support training, if you already had that under your belt, imagine instead of only being able to run 15 miles in training at marathon pace, now because you're so fit already, you can take this and shift it up this way and you can run much more specific workouts. But here's the catch, is that these workouts are extraordinarily difficult. And if you can actually do them, you're probably in shape to almost run your personal best in some distances. You are a beast already. So what do you need to do to get in shape for this? And that would be what I would call base training. So when you think of base training, a lot of people will conceptualize it as running slow mileage and more and more and more of it. Ideally running a lot of slow, easy miles. Now, that's a good idea, but you're omitting the other end of this spectrum over here. And so true base training actually capitalizes on training the two extremes that are furthest away from your race distance. So that means also doing a lot of very fast, very short speed work. Now, over time, your speed work gets slower and longer, so it looks like that. And your long runs get a little bit faster and a little bit longer. They're more taxing, so it looks kind of like that. Now, when you can complete a phase like this, you're set up to be able to complete a phase like this. And when you can complete a phase like that, well then, we knock both of them out and we focus for 6 weeks, very specifically, right at your race pace. And we do workouts that are incredibly specific to your race and will have a dramatic gain in your performance. Now, that being said, I'm going to share one other secret with you here, and that is you don't even need to have these fibers be that strong up there. You only need them to be about this strong, and here's the reason why. As you fatigue, as these muscle fibers fatigue in the race, what you're going to do is start to recruit the sum of the fibers that are adjacent to it. So when your marathon pace fibers start to get tired, you're just going to recruit a little bit of the faster twitch and a little bit of the slower twitch. And the two of them working together will produce the same pace, and you're able to maintain that pace longer. Now that's amazing, right? And this process will continue on and on and on until all of your fast twitch fibers are fatigued. It will go both ways. But when all of these are fatigued here, then the only way you can continue running is by slowing down. And so the focus of our training is not only to make your specific fibers as strong as possible, but also to give you the support surrounding it so that you can not only complete an incredibly difficult workout during the later phases of your training, but also during your race, you have an incredible base of fitness to tap into that will basically double your ability to maintain race pace for longer. This is how the best runners in the world over the last about 50 years or so, maybe even going on 70 years now, have trained. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of both coaches and runners that have trained in this way. So first, let's take a look at Mihlia Igloy. Now, you might not have heard of this guy, but you might have heard of Bob Schul here. Bob Schul is the only American to ever win the 5,000 meters at the Olympics. He did it in Tokyo in the 60s, and he was trained by Coach Igloy. At one time, his runners held the world records in the 1,500, the 5,000, the 10,000, the 1,000, and the 2,000. Now here they are. Here's a picture of Sandor Iharos and Istvan Rostovglowski. These guys were really excellent and they trained in this way. Now, one of the greatest coaches over the last 20 years or so, Renato Canova, who trained Saeed Shaheen, former world record holder in the steeplechase, Nicholas Kemboy, Moses Mosop. Now here's Moses Mosop in 2011 on the Boston Marathon course. How many of you want to run or have run Boston before? It's traditionally not a fast course. Yet the first two guys in 2011 broke the world record there. They were coached by Canova. These coaches are training in this way. Now let's look at some of the other athletes. Ryan Hall. And Ryan Hall is a UFC fighter. This is my attempt at a horrible joke here, but not only is Ryan Hall a UFC fighter, he's also this guy here. And you might recognize him as the American record holder in the marathon. Really great runner. This is the way he trained. Dathan Ritzenhein, the former 5,000 meter American record holder, 3-time Olympian, 2:07 marathoner. Okay, these guys know what they're doing. Bob Schul, Jorge Torres, Jason Hartman, Shane Culpepper. They all trained in this way. Now I'm going to share with you one of the runners who I've worked with so you can relate, because maybe you're not shooting for the Olympics, but maybe you want to just take your running to the next level. So here's Alex. Alex was a pretty good runner in high school, in college. He was pretty good, not the best of the best, but pretty fast guy. But he decided that he wanted more. He decided he wanted to win. He wanted to set records. He wanted to level up his running a lot. And so he started training like this. And I'm going to tell you what he did within 1 year. I'm going to share a couple of pictures with you. Here he is finishing his first 100-mile race. He's now done several of them. Here he is winning the Brasstown Ballbuster, which is it's a 5K, but it's like up this crazy mountain. And he did a great job there. He got to be a really strong runner. Here he is winning a 50-mile race. Now this one's crazy. During the 50-mile race, he took over an hour off of his time on the same course than the previous year. Not only that, but when he went through the marathon split in his 50-mile race, he PR'd in the marathon during a 50-mile race. That's like PRing in your 5K while running a 10K, right? It's quite impressive. It means that he leveled up his endurance, his speed, his ability to trail run, and he did this all within 1 year. Now, I want you also to just see the smile, right? This guy is kind of a happy runner. And here's another quick story for you. At this race called the Black Toe Ultra, it's a loop race, and it just goes around and around, up and down this mountain. It was in the winter, and he was winning, but he started getting cold, hypothermic, and cramping up. So here's a picture of him getting treated for cramping muscles and hypothermia. And while he was in there, the guy who was in second place passed him and went out for another lap. So we said, not me. And he got up here and he went out and he ran 2 more laps. He passed the guy and he ended up winning. Here he is at the winner's circle for that race. And you can't do things like that unless you level yourself to a pretty stinking high level, much higher than he was before. And he was able to go from, pretty good runner to this badass guy really in just 1 year. So ultimately what I want to share with you is that when you train your heart and your lungs, but not your muscular system, then this is what happens. If you're a Big Bang Theory fan, here's a Sheldon shooting at the hoop, right? He's a really smart guy. He has a lot of information. He kind of knows what to do, but he hasn't put in the practice of neuromuscular coordination. And so he can't get the ball in the hoop. It's the same thing with our running. We might know what to do. We might think we're going to push really hard. We might think we're training really hard. But if we don't train the thing that really matters, and that is where the rubber meets the road. If you were a car, the training just for a bigger fuel tank, your heart and lungs, it's not going to work. It's a good idea to have a good fuel tank, but if you don't train the wheels to spin, nothing matters. And so running is like that. Your neuromuscular system are the wheels. That's what we need to train in order to have a breakthrough in performance. I showed you that pyramid, right? And there were 4 levels. At the bottom is your body composition. Then we have your metabolic systems. And then we have your neuromuscular system. And at the top is the #1 limiter of your performance. Stick around, watch your email for tomorrow. I'm going to send you the video out for that. And in the meanwhile, go ahead and hit reply and send me an email and let me know what you learned. Let me know what workouts you might want to throw in and what workouts you might want to stop doing and what you think you're really capable of. I do my very best to answer all of the emails that I get from you guys. I read all of them, and if I have the time, I will respond to you one-on-one. I'll see you here tomorrow. Take care.
Stepping like a weapon on the field to get some. On the real, we appear to get gone. Victory is ours. Bring the chip home.
Did you like that video? Great. Then do 2 things. Pick up a copy of Run Elite. You can get it on Amazon. You can get the audio on Audible as well. And watch the free training that I have with the link in the description below. And it's going to blow your mind. It's about an hour where we go super deep. Thank you so much for watching.
Faster! Faster!